We're here at week two, Cybersecurity Foundations. Great week, week one. Looking forward to week two. Now, in week two, what are we going to talk about? Module two. Really now we're going to get to how you implement CIA through fundamental security design principles. And we're going to kind of really dive a little deeper this week into that. There's a couple of assignments I think you're going to enjoy. Some objectives for this week. Discuss the importance of asset ownership and protecting data. You can't protect what you can't see. So asset ownership, understanding what assets you have in your organization is huge. Also going to look at how we apply some of the fundamental security design principles to a case study. You have a case study we're going to go through, and I think that'll help maybe bring some of the pieces from week one where we talked about security controls, implementing controls, getting into NIST 853, some of those things. Assess breakdowns of data protection in a case study. So we're going to have one of the case studies is, something went wrong. Now, how do we bring those pieces together and assess that? This week, you got 4 chapters, chapter 4, 8, 9, and 15 that ties to this. As you see, some of our reading this week has to do with ethics, law, things of that nature, compliance, a lot of that. So again, just a quick overview of risk. You're probably going to see risk every week. Okay? I'm just letting you know because everything we do is rooted and grounded in risk. Risk, what is it? The likelihood of a threat agent taking advantage of a vulnerability, corresponding business impacts. A vulnerability encounters a threat. Yes, there's impact. What do we do as cybersecurity? We monitor, assess risk to information systems based on these 3 factors: confidentiality, integrity, availability, and all of those is part of our assessment of risk and how we ensure that your information is available when you need it, it hasn't changed, and it hasn't been released to unauthorized entities or subjects. Now, we talked about the fundamental security design principles. Well, this is what we're talking about. There again, like I said, there's a PDF document that you're gonna see. You pull that up, and it has all of these on here. So these are the principles that help create secure systems. And like I say, you want to build this into your system. You don't want to try to strap it on, later on. So for this week, week 2, we're going to be looking at the highlighted ones, the ones that are highlighted in red: fail safe, fail secure, layering, or you may hear this called security in depth or defense in depth more, as well as least privilege, modularity, and usability. So when we look at this, let's get into these. Let's drill down into this a little bit deeper, okay? Least privilege, like I say, the assurance that an entity only has the minimal amount of privileges to perform their duties. And that's key. We're going to go deeper in each one of these. I'm just kind of scanning across the top right now. Layering or defense in depth, having multiple forms of security in your network, right? Not just one big firewall, but having multiple places where security it checks and balances within your organization, within your network. Fail safe, fail secure. That is want to ensure that when something fails, it fails in the proper state, so that either you're given access to information object or you're denied access to the object. Modularity, what is that talking about? Breaking things into smaller, manageable pieces that can be reused or can be repurposed time and time again. And usability, how easy is your hardware or your software to operate? Where you really see a lot of usability with respect to websites and how easy it is to navigate, and but not just websites, but any type of software, any type of hardware. How usable, how user friendly is that for a user? So let's get into this a little bit deeper. Let's talk about least privileges, all right? And really, least privilege many times comes down to user roles. On your network, in your organization, wherever you may be, you're going to probably have 2 types of users. One I'm going to call a general user. A general user is anybody on the network that can input, modify, or extract or remove information from the information system, and they do not require elevated privileges. That's anybody on the network. The next type group is called privileged users. And these are individuals who have the have elevated privileges where they can perform security relevant types of functions. So really now with a general user, you want to be sure that they have just enough access to be able to perform their job, their role, whatever that may be. No more, no less. But even more so with privileged users, because privileged users, this is really, this is where things really go bad, because many times your privileged users, they have accesses, they have elevated privileges to be able to do some pretty nefarious things if they so desire. So when you look at privileged user roles, on most networks, you have some type of domain system administrator. They are responsible for, the enterprise, which means that they have access to root. They can sudo up to root. They have access on a Windows machine to be able to elevate or escalate privileges. So they can access workstations. They can access your domain controllers, servers, backup servers, and because they have to administer all of these things. So with a domain administrator, you want to ensure that, again, they only have privileges and accesses that they need. But the biggest part with least privilege with respect to a domain system administrator is that you can audit their activity. You want to know where they're going. You want your system set up so that they just can't log in as root, okay? They have to be able to log in either on a headless machine and then escalate or sudo up to root. That way you have an audit trail. If they're all allowed just to log in with a password right into root, any insider threat is going to eat your lunch. Local administrators. Now, local administrators, not to be confused with the domain administrator. Why? Because knowing that they're going to have elevated privileges on an individual system, but not the entire enterprise, not the entire domain. So they may have elevated privileges on a couple of servers that they have to use. But the same thing, you want to ensure that when they have to escalate their privileges, that they're able to be audited and they have just enough rights on that server, on that box to do what they need to do. Network administrators, these are individuals who many times they're maintaining the layer 1, layer 2, layer 3 infrastructure. Your switches, your routers, your firewalls, your access control lists. Again, individuals who have a lot of power on your network. So, and one of the things that when you think about least privilege, your network administrator should not be a domain administrator. I know, I will say, small organizations, many times you only have 1 or 2 IT guys. So they are Johnny on the spot for everything. They've got God privileges on your network. But if you are able to, you should be able to have least privileges authorities between network administrators and domain administrators to provide some level of protection. Cybersecurity auditors. Now, we're the ones that say, yeah, we're wanting to be able to audit all these. But at the same time, we should not have elevated privileges to be domain administrators, system administrators, or network administrators. Why? Because we want to maintain 2 things: separation of duty and least privilege. Now, engineers, many times they may need elevated privileges on engineering boxes, whether it's software, hardware, whatever it may be. But again, you want to be sure that they only have the privileges they need to do the functions, just the functions they need, so that we're ensuring separation of duties and least privileges across these roles. Let's look at defense in depth, or we call it layering. I call it defense in depth, security in depth, trust model, zero trust. I mean, it just keeps changing the name, but it's kind of the same thing over and over. Well, where does it start? Now, I will tell you guys, this is where you need to start in your organization from a security perspective, is knowing what I call the golden egg. Where is the golden egg? What are you protecting? Many IT guys, many security guys go to work every day, and we just start going through security controls and doing all the paperwork and doing all these things. And many times we don't even know, what is it? Where is the CPI? Where is the critical protected information? Where is the intellectual property? What is critical? Where does that critical data reside? So you go into an organization, that's where you need to start. Okay, that's what I am protecting. Whether it's, critical data sitting in a file folder. That file folder now is sitting on a server. So now you see the different rings starting to build. So that server is connected to some type of an access switch. And that access switch is connected to usually to like a core switch in your organization. And that connects the users into your network. So I have this user, got a laptop out here, very similar to the scenario, the case study you're going to do. He's got a laptop, connects. There's firewall set up on here, VLANs set here. We got user account permissions, and when we get here, we're using some type of access control model, whether it's discretionary access control, mandatory access control, role-based access control, rule-based access control. So you see we have layered defense. We're using different security solutions at different points throughout our network. Why? I'm glad you asked that question. Because you got bad guys who are trying to get into your network many times at each of these layers or each of these rings. So you want to ensure that, let's say if the bad guy, he's sitting outside of your network trying to hack into your switch, or trying to impersonate this guy. So you want to see that, okay, do I have access control lists and firewalls in place that can block him? But let's say you don't. Or let's say he's already at the next layer. So even though he's in, does this computer have access to the VLANs and the access control list at this layer? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Hopefully you do. But just in case he made it past that, well, even though he can hit this machine because he's done a spoof, he's done an ARP redirect, ARP spoofing, and he has impersonated this computer, gotten all the way to right here. Now, what should happen? Well, now we're going to have a user account. So hopefully this individual, even though he's gotten here from layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, but he doesn't have the account credentials to get onto that server. So hopefully we've stopped him here. But let's just say he did. He got those account credentials. Well, now he's got an account here. Hopefully now with discretionary access control, or rule-based access control, we can still keep him away from the golden egg because he wouldn't have access to that folder. So defense in depth or layering, that's what we're talking about. Having a layered security model, and then you inject security controls and security mitigation points at each of these layers to help protect against some type of nefarious activity. Fail safe, fail secure. When we talk about that, what is that? When we talk about fail safe, let's talk about fail safe first. That's when a control fails and access is wide open. Now, an example that you see in buildings. Let's say a fire alarm. Well, what should happen? For the most part, all your emergency doors should open, right? Because you want to be sure that everyone can get out of the building. So, so when we think about fail safe, we want, we want things to fail in a safe condition to where we're either, getting people out or giving people access. Let's just use another example kind of from a network perspective. So let's say you're on a network, you have a firewall, okay? And this firewall, it's not able to categorize an application or a website. And what a firewall does, you've set it up, you want to configure it so it's either going to allow traffic or block traffic. If this firewall is set up in a fail-safe mode, then I don't recognize it, so I'm going to open it up and let you have access. So it failed in a safe condition. That's a fail-safe approach. Do we really want to do that with firewalls, things like that? Well, it's based on your business model. I mean, really, it does. Because if you say, well, something goes wrong with my firewall and it shuts everything down, and now the CEO of the company can't communicate, he may be a little upset. So that's why you have to be able to talk from a business perspective with your ISO, with your PMs, with your management, what's the risk associated? Because that could cause the loss of millions of dollars based on a contract, and we can't negotiate because our network is down. Now, in a fail secure environment, let's use that same firewall example. Failing secure would be that, it can't categorize or doesn't recognize an application or a URL and it blocks the traffic. Boom, no. Then it fails secure. Another example of that, it would be audit logs. Let's say you have a Windows machine, Windows 10 or Windows 11 machine, your audit log is full. What happens to that machine? Well, it can no longer audit, then the system should shut down. You should get that blue screen of death. Why? Because if it fails secure. That we don't want this machine operating if we're not able to audit the activity on it. Fail safe, fail secure. Let's take a look at modularity. Now, modularity, like I talked about, is the process of putting things of interest into modules or minimizing dependencies on external things. I'm going to use a virtualization example for this, okay? And maybe you may learn a little more about virtualization in the process. You never know. All right, let's say you have a computer, a regular computer system. This is traditional computing where you've got hardware. That hardware can be your CPUs, your central processing units, your memory, your RAM, your storage, your hard drive, your network interface card, your input, your I/O ports, all your USB ports and things of that nature. All of that makes up your hardware. And of course, there's a power supply in there somewhere, right? Yeah. This is your hardware layer. Now, on top of that hardware, we mount an operating system. Let's say Windows 10. We're using Windows 10. Windows 10 is mounted directly on that hardware. And then what do? Then we install applications onto the operating system. That is the standard way our computers are built today. Hardware, operating system, applications. Traditional computing. Then, you say, well, that's good, but I want to do something a little different. Well, what do? We go into what we call operating system virtualization. We install a piece of software called a hypervisor. And this could be VMware, it could be VirtualBox, it could be Windows Hyper-V. I mean, and there's a litany of different VM or hypervisors on the market. For this example, so we're going to install VMware. Boom. We install VMware in this Windows operating system environment. Now, what does VMware do? Well, to understand virtualization, operating system virtualization, you have to kind of understand your hardware. So a typical computer, I am not using all the CPU power. I'm probably not using all the memory I have. Probably not using all the storage. The network interface card, it has capabilities to multitask. And I probably have, output ports galore so that, I've got enough output ports. Well, when let's say this operating system, when this operating system was installed on this hardware, it looked for certain things. It looked for computer processing, so like a CPU or a CPU core. It looked for memory. So that's why if you're going to install Windows 10, it tells you you're going to need at least one core. You're going to need at least 16 gig of RAM. You're going to need at least X amount of hard drive space, and you will need a network interface. That's what the Windows operating system is looking for to be installed on the hardware. Okay, so for this operating system, it saw that and go, great, I can be installed. But what the hypervisor does, it says, you know what? I know you're not using all that hardware, so I am going to provision some of that excess CPU power you got. Maybe you have a machine with a multi-core machine. Well, I'm going to use one of those cores. You've got 64 gig of RAM and you're only using 16. So it says I'm going to use another 16 gig of the RAM that's not being used. You've got a huge hard drive, so I'm going to provision about 20 gig of space or 35, 40 gig of space on this hard drive. I'm going to connect to that NIC because I know that there's excess capacity, and I'll also connect up to these physical I/O ports. Why does it do that? Because now the hypervisor looks like hardware. It emulates this hardware. So now I can install another operating system. In this case, I just picked, Ubuntu, which is a Linux distribution. And what is this operating system is looking for the same thing that this operating system is looking for. And where does it see it? The VM, the hypervisor. The hypervisor provisions a certain amount of virtual CPU power, memory, storage, networking that's now made available. So now I can install Ubuntu. And when I install Ubuntu here, now I can install Ubuntu applications right there on Ubuntu. So now I've virtualized the operating system. Pretty cool, huh? But wait, there's more. There's more. Not only can we do operating system virtualization, we can also do application virtualization. It's what we call containers. You may hear this term, containers, like Docker and Kubernetes and some of these terms you may or may not be familiar with. But yeah, that's what application. So I've shown you here how I can virtualize an operating system. Now I can use an orchestrator, again, like Docker, Kubernetes, Podman. There's different orchestrators out there where now I can do the same thing. I can have an abstraction of an application. And that application is like in its own little file, its own little bubble. That's why I call it a container. Inside of that container, it has everything it needs for this application to run. The binary files, the library files, a minimal guest OS kind of sits in here. And this orchestrator, you know what the orchestrator does? It presents to this container the minimal things needed for it to run. Okay? So now not only can I do legacy or traditional computing where everything is tightly coupled, now I can do an abstraction and with a hypervisor and have other operating systems. I can do another abstraction and have applications that are not running, but they're not installed. See, these applications are installed right in the operating system. These applications are not installed on the but they will run. They have enough processing power and everything they need from this machine where I can launch this application. But if this application goes bad, I don't have to uninstall it. I just delete it, throw it away, grab another container, boom, keep running. This container could be on a USB drive. I could have my applications on a USB drive, plug it in, it runs, unplug it, walk away. And the great part about it is it's rootless, it's delinked or decoupled from this machine. So from a security perspective, now if there's some security vulnerabilities here, those vulnerabilities should be protected from here. In the traditional environment, if there were security vulnerabilities here, it could easily infect my operating system and other things going on that machine. So you see how now we've made computing modular, modular. So I'm able to separate things and minimize dependencies. If I'm running this, kind of a real world example, this is not how I would do it, but for a academic and being able to explain the concepts, yes, but real world, probably not. Better ways of running that. But with these abstractions, this container, this application container is completely separate from this virtual operate OS environment, which is completely separate from this host environment. Yeah, modularity. We do it all the time. That's what makes cloud, such a buzzword du jour today. But because we're able to do these types of things in the computing environment. The last one we're going to talk about today is usability. How easy is it for your hardware, software to operate, especially for first-time users? And really where you see a lot of this is with, on websites. Now, when we think about usability, we want to talk about the 5 E's, 5 echoes of usability. How effective is your GUI? How effective? Think about a website. How effective is it? How efficient? Do I have to click 15 times to get to something, which is very inefficient? Engaging. Does it keep me engaged? Because it's called stickiness. When I go to a website, am I engaged or is it, I don't want to be here? Error tolerant. So if I make a mistake, how tolerant is it, or Does it going to lock up the website? Is it going to shut down the back-end servers? And how easy is it to learn? So we talk about those 5 E's. So what I did, I went and looked at some websites. First one, I think this is a very usable website. This is one of the Expedia, I think. Yeah, Expedia, where you can get flights and hotels and all that. Very simple, very effective, very efficient, engaging. Well, depending on what you're looking for its respective engagement. But they got the picture here of the people out there on the beach, and water and waves. Can't really speak to error tolerant, but easy to use, learn. Yes, I don't need a manual. I don't need a help screen. I can click and figure out pretty quickly, even as a new user, how to get the information. Now, something else I did, I pulled up my own website. This is our ministry website, and I looked at that. Is it effective? I don't know. Is it efficient? In my mind, no, because I want to rebuild this site someday. And so to me, my own site isn't really meeting the 5 E's of usability the way that I would like for it to, because you got menus up here, and they're kind of all over the place. I've got music CDs down here. The titles are wrapping, and you can't really read them well. They're really small. So I got work to do on my site. So it's usability probably not as user friendly as I would like. All right, let's talk about the case study. Like saying this week you have a case study, and this case study you're gonna read that case study, and now you're gonna start actually employing some of these the fundamental security design principles, and you're gonna employ the ones that we just talked about: least privilege, layering, fail safe, fail secure, modularity, usability. This is just a snapshot. This thing goes on. There's several of these. So after you read the case study, then you're gonna come back and you're going to go into using your controls, your control recommendations, okay? Because in the case study, we had a security type of a breach. So here's an example. Automatically lock workstations after a standard period of time. So which one of these does it impact? Does it impact least privilege, layering, fail-safe, modularity, usability? And which security control objective does it align to? Confidentiality, integrity, availability. You just put a C, an I, or an A there. And then explain your choices. Why did you pick layering? Now, I chose layering because it adds another layer of protection for the confidentiality of our data. And you're going to go through each one of these all the way down that list and put an X in the one that would best reflects your security control recommendation. Okay? Yeah, not that hard, is it? And again, this is rather rubric. Keep your explanations to 1 or 2 sentences. Provide specific justification. Guys, I don't want to see a paragraph, in here. 2, 3 paragraphs. Be succinct in your communication. 1 or 2 sentences. Why did you pick that? Case study for this week. Recommend getting started on it early, get it submitted so that if you got some issues, we can work through those early. Again, guys, week 2 should be a great week. It kind of piggybacks on week 1, and week 3 is going to piggyback on week 2. All of these weeks, all of these modules, they're interlocked. It really does look at those fundamental security design principles. All right, guys, have a great week. If you need anything, reach out. You've got my contact information. Take care.